A family here spends close to $250 a year on cleaning sprays that mostly sit half-used under the sink. My name is Mika Sato, and I've run a household of 7 for 25 years without ever hiring outside help or buying one of those bottles. My grandmother, Fumiko, cleaned her whole farmhouse in Tono with rice water, vinegar, and baking soda, and I still clean my home in Sendai the exact same way. I'm going to show you what goes in the kitchen, the bathroom, the windows, and the floors. And I'm going to end with the one habit almost every cleaning video like this skips completely. Here's the thing you have to understand before we go any further, because it's the heart of the whole matter. Open the cabinet under most kitchen sinks in this country and you will find 8, 10, sometimes 20 bottles, a glass cleaner, a toilet cleaner, an oven cleaner, a separate spray just for the counters. Each one is bought for one narrow job, and the house underneath all of them is still not really clean. That isn't because you haven't tried hard enough. It's because a house full of separate chemical solutions was never the answer, and somewhere along the way, everybody just quietly agreed to stop questioning it. Families here spend, on average, somewhere between $170 and close to $700 a year just on cleaning products, depending on how big the house is and how many rooms need their own special spray. A quarter of that, saved back in your own pocket, is real money over the course of a year, the kind of money that covers a car repair or a stack of school supplies without a second thought. My grandmother, Fumiko, never had that kind of money to lose in the first place. She ran an entire farmhouse in the mountains of Tono on 3 things: rice water, vinegar, and baking soda. 3 ingredients, not 20 bottles, and a home that stayed clean winter after winter with nothing extra bought. In a place that cold, wasting money on something you already had in the kitchen would have felt foolish. I want to tell you something before we go room by room, because if you only remember one thing from this video, I want it to be this. The pantry swaps I'm about to show you're useful, and they will save you real money. But they're not the actual secret. And almost every video that promises to clean your whole house for free stops right there, at the swaps, and never tells you the rest of it. Stay with me to the end. The habit that mattered most in my grandmother's house was never one you could pour into a spray bottle, and it's the reason her house stayed clean even in the years there was barely money for anything at all. Every time you rinse rice before cooking it, cloudy water runs off into the sink and gets poured straight down the drain. In Japan, that water has a name. It's called togijiru, and my grandmother never once let it go to waste. That cloudy water is full of starch, the same starch that swells up and thickens when you cook rice itself. And starch acts as a mild, gentle soap. Wipe it onto a countertop, a wooden cutting board, or a stovetop with a soft cloth, and the starch grabs onto grease and lifts it, the same way a bit of soap does, only softer and free. Here's how you use it properly. Save the water from the first or second rinse, since that's where the starch is thickest. Dip a soft cloth in, wring it out until it's only damp, and wipe the surface down. Then follow right behind with a dry cloth and buff it. Rice water left wet on a surface can dry cloudy, and it doesn't keep well sitting around, so use it the same day and pour out whatever you don't use. On a wooden cutting board, treat it as a helper alongside hot water and soap, not a replacement for them, since a board that touches raw food still needs a real wash and a full dry before it goes back in the drawer. On the stovetop, the trick is timing more than anything. Wipe a fresh splatter while it's still warm, and the rice water lifts it in one pass, but wait until dinner is over and the same spot is hardened, and you will be scrubbing instead of wiping. For anything already baked on, rice water won't touch it. And that's where baking soda earns its place. Mix it with a little water until it turns into a thick paste. Spread it over the burnt ring in a pot, or the crust inside an oven, and let it sit overnight. Baking soda is a mild alkaline powder with just enough grit to scrub without scratching. Given hours instead of minutes, it works its way under the burnt layer while you sleep, so that in the morning, a damp cloth lifts off what used to take an aching arm and a sink full of steel wool. For a ring that has truly welded itself to the bottom of the pot, some cooks pour in enough vinegar to cover the spot, sprinkle baking soda straight on top, and let the fizzing reaction do the work of loosening it before the paste ever goes on. The bubbling looks dramatic, but it's only the acid and the alkaline reacting against each other. And that small chemical fight is what pries the burnt layer loose from the metal underneath it. Then there's the knife. And this is the part that costs nothing but attention. Rinse it the moment you set it down. Never let food sit and dry on the blade. Wash it by hand, dry it standing up on its handle, and never let it soak in a sink full of water or ride through a dishwasher cycle. In my own kitchen, that knife sits in its own spot by the window, never tossed in with the rest of the dishes. My children learned early that it was the one thing in the kitchen they treated differently from everything else. A good knife lasts 20 years or more this way, and the habit itself is the whole cost. Nothing to buy, nothing to replace. Just the same 3 small motions every single time you use it. Fill a spray bottle you already own with equal parts vinegar and water, and you have the same descaler that dissolves the white crust building up on a shower head or a faucet. Hard water leaves mineral scale behind, and scale isn't dirt sitting on the surface. It's mineral bonded to the metal, and a brush alone will wear your arm out before it wears the scale down. Vinegar is a mild acid, and acid is what breaks that mineral apart. So you spray it on, give it a few minutes to work, and wipe. The soap scum on a shower door comes off the exact same way. On a shower head with the holes clogged solid, tying a bag of the same mixture around it overnight does the same job while you sleep. For the tub and the tile, baking soda sprinkled straight onto a damp cloth scrubs the grime loose without scratching the surface underneath it, the way a store-bought abrasive cleaner sometimes will. For heavier calcium buildup around the drain or the faucet base, a little citric acid mixed in alongside it cuts through what plain baking soda alone leaves behind. That combination is something Japanese households have leaned on in the bath for a long time, long before either ingredient had a brand name attached to it. I want to be honest about the limit here, because I don't sell you anything I haven't tested myself. If mold has already set into the grout, neither vinegar nor baking soda is going to pull it back out. That calls for a real mold treatment, and there's no shame in reaching for one when the problem has already gone that far. Now, here's the habit underneath all of it, the one that matters more than either ingredient. Before you even step out of the shower, take a squeegee or an old towel kept just for this, and wipe the walls and the floor down while the water is still fresh. Do this every single time, and water spots and mildew never get the chance to set in, because the surface never sits wet long enough to grow anything on it. I taught my own children to do this before they were old enough to reach the top of the shower wall without standing on the edge of the tub. It became so ordinary in our house that nobody thought of it as cleaning at all. That's the pattern behind everything in this video. The spray and the powder clean what is already there. The wipe down stops anything from building up in the first place, and it costs you nothing but 30 seconds. The same vinegar and water spray works on glass, but wipe it off with crumpled newspaper instead of a paper towel, and you get a shine with no streaks left behind. People like to say it's something in the ink, but the plain truth is simpler than that. Newsprint is thin and nearly free of lint, so it doesn't leave the little fibers behind that a paper towel does. And that's the whole reason it works, not some hidden trick in the print. Crumple the page into a loose ball first rather than folding it flat, because the crumpled edges are what pick up the last bit of moisture instead of just pushing it around the glass in a thin film. I will tell you flat, this doesn't work the same on every pane of glass. Some modern windows carry a coating meant to shed water and dirt on their own, and vinegar can behave differently on those surfaces than it does on a plain mirror or an older window. Test a small corner first before you trust it on a whole wall of glass. Where it does work, and that's most ordinary household glass and mirrors, it costs you a spray bottle you already own, and a newspaper you were going to throw out anyway. My grandmother kept a stack of old papers folded by the back door for exactly this, and I still do the same thing in my own home now, tucked next to the vinegar bottle where the children know to find it. Whatever rice water or vinegar mix you have left over from the kitchen can go straight into a mop bucket, and on most sealed wooden tile, it cleans the floor just as well as it cleans a counter. But the floor isn't really where the real lesson of this video lives. The real lesson is a word, soji. It means the daily clean, and it's the reason a Japanese home rarely needs one long, exhausting deep clean to begin with. Soji isn't a big production. It's wiping the counter while dinner is still cooking, sweeping the entryway for 2 or 3 minutes each morning, and never letting today's mess wait around to become tomorrow's project. In Japan, this habit runs so deep that many schools don't employ janitors at all. Students sweep their own classrooms and clean their own hallways every single day, on a rotation, because keeping a space clean is treated as everyone's job from a young age, not a job you hand off to somebody else once you're grown. What that means for your own house is simple. The reason a deep clean feels like such a battle every single weekend was never about which spray you reached for. It's that 6 or 7 days of mess had already piled up by the time you got to it. 5 minutes a day, done in the same order every time, adds up to less total work than one long Saturday spent catching up. And the house never gets the chance to fall behind in the first place. In my own home, certain days carry certain small jobs, just as my mother Yoshiko ran things when I was a girl, and I never had to sit down and decide what needed doing, because the rhythm already told me. A schedule you write on paper can fail the moment life gets busy. A rhythm you feel in your body doesn't fail that way, because you're not deciding anymore. You're simply doing what that day has always called for. There's one more habit even bigger than this one, and I'm holding on to it until the very end, so keep listening. Save the peels from an orange or a lemon, drop them into a jar of vinegar, and let it sit for 2 weeks. Strain out the peels, And what is left is a citrus vinegar spray that cuts through grease on a stovetop and doubles as an air freshener, since the citrus oil covers the sharper smell of the vinegar underneath it. I keep a jar like this going almost year-round on the shelf above my own stove, started fresh every couple of weeks with whatever peels came out of that week's cooking, so there's never a day it runs empty. Dry a second batch of peels out fully, and set them in a drawer or a closet. Mocs avoid the scent, and it works as a repellent that costs you nothing but peels you were already throwing away. For the refrigerator, an open box of baking soda absorbs odors, but only if you actually give it room to work. A box tucked in the back corner with one flap barely open barely does anything because it needs real surface area exposed to the air to pull odors in and hold on to them. Pour it into a shallow dish instead, and it does the job the way it's supposed to. That's a small fix, and it's the kind of small fix that adds up once you stop paying for a dozen separate solutions to the exact same problem of a house that just doesn't smell the way you want it to. Now, here's the part I promised you, the habit that matters more than any pantry swap in this entire video. It's called Danshari, and it has 3 steps. Refuse what you don't need before it ever comes into the house. Dispose of what no longer serves you, even if it still technically works. And separate yourself, emotionally, from objects you have been holding onto out of guilt rather than use. Most cleaning videos skip this part entirely, because a bottle of vinegar is easy to film, and a hard conversation about what you own isn't. The plain truth behind it is this: a house full of extra things is never easy to keep clean, no matter what you wipe it down with. Every object you own is one more thing that needs a place, one more thing that collects dust, one more thing standing between you and a counter you can wipe clean in under a minute. My grandmother Fumiko wasn't decluttering because it was fashionable. In Tono, if you kept something you didn't need, you felt the loss of that space in winter, when every room mattered and nothing could be replaced easily. That feeling never left her. When I first set up my own small apartment in Sendai with almost no money for anything, I found myself doing the exact same thing without ever calling it a method. I used vinegar, baking soda, and rags cut from my husband Kenji's old shirts instead of buying anything new at all. Once a year, around the turn of the new year, our family does something called usoji, and it isn't the same as an ordinary deep clean. It goes room by room, drawer by drawer, wiping down doors and windows, airing out futons and cupboards, clearing the dust that settled into corners all year long, so that what is left behind actually deserves the space it takes up before the new year begins. It's less about scrubbing harder and more about closing out the year properly, the same way you wouldn't want to carry last year's clutter or last year's arguments straight into the next one. That's the habit underneath every other habit in this video. The rice water and the baking soda keep what you own clean. Danshari and Osoji decide what you own in the first place. And that's the whole difference between a house that stays clean and one that keeps fighting you no matter how many bottles you buy. A clean house for $0 was never really about rice water or vinegar. It was always the habits underneath them, the daily wipe down, and deciding honestly what deserves a place in your home. Pick one habit from this video, Soji or Danshari, and start it this week in your own house. Tell me in the comments which one you chose, and next time, I will show you the weekly rhythm that replaced my to-do list for